There are things that professional baseball managers are trained never to say in public. Never show weakness. Never give the opponent a psychological edge. Never admit, in front of a microphone, that the other team has something you cannot answer. Never say out loud what every person in the room already knows, that you are facing a problem that your rulebook does not have a solution for. Craig Starten said it anyway. After 2 consecutive losses. After 2 games of watching his lineup do everything right, work counts, make contact, run the bases well, execute the fundamentals, and still come away with nothing. After 2 games of sitting in the dugout and watching Shohei Ohtani operate on the other side of the field in a way that made the careful preparation his coaching staff had done feel almost beside the point. He stood at the podium. He looked at the reporters. And he said it. This is just too unfair. 5 words. Said by a professional manager who has spent a lifetime in this game. Who has seen great players. Who has managed against great players. Who understood, going into this series, that Ohtani was exceptional. 5 words that contained, underneath their surface frustration, something much more interesting. Because Craig Starten was not just venting. He was not simply reacting to 2 losses the way any competitor reacts to losing. He was saying something specific, about a rule, about a controversy, about a situation that has divided baseball opinion at every level from the front office to the broadcast booth to the fan sitting in the upper deck. He was talking about the Ohtani Rule. And then, after the anger, after the frustration, after the press conference that made headlines for all the reasons he probably didn't intend, something shifted. The professionalism cracked. The competitor's armor came apart for just a moment. And Craig Starten admitted something he clearly did not plan to admit. His true feelings about Shohei Ohtani. Before we get to the controversy, we need to understand the emotional temperature of the room when Craig Starten walked to that podium. 2 consecutive losses. Back to back. Against a team anchored by a player your entire pitching staff has prepared specifically to limit, and the preparation did not work. Not because the preparation was bad. Not because the pitchers executed poorly. But because the player on the other side of the field found answers that the preparation had not accounted for. That is a specific kind of frustration. It is different from losing because your team made errors, or because the other team got lucky, or because one pitcher had a bad night. Those losses are digestible. You identify the mistake, you correct it, you move on. This kind of loss is harder to process. Because when you watch the film afterward, you see pitches that were in good locations and Ohtani hit them anyway. You see sequences that were well designed and Ohtani read them anyway. You see a game plan that, by any reasonable professional standard, was sound, and it did not matter. The Padres' interim manager had been in this job long enough to understand the weight of back-to-back losses at a critical point in the season. The interim label carries its own pressure. You are managing not just the team's record, but the perception of your own performance, the trust of the organization, the confidence of the players in the dugout who are looking at you to give them something to hold on to. Walking into that press conference, Craig Starten was carrying all of that. And then a reporter asked about the Ohtani Rule. For anyone who needs the context, the Ohtani Rule, officially known as the two-way player exception, was created specifically because of Shohei Ohtani. Before Ohtani, the rule was simple. If a pitcher is removed from the game on the mound, he can remain in the lineup as a designated hitter. But if the DH slot turns over, if the DH is removed, the pitcher must also leave the game. The rule worked fine for decades. Because no pitcher was also a legitimate everyday hitter. The scenario it was designed to address, a pitcher who was also one of the best offensive players in the lineup, simply did not exist. Then Ohtani existed. And Major League Baseball had to confront a problem it had never anticipated. What do you do when the starting pitcher is also the most dangerous hitter in your lineup? What do you do when pulling him from the mound for pitch count reasons should not require you to also lose his bat, because his bat is genuinely too valuable to sacrifice? The answer was the Ohtani Rule. A specific exception, created for a specific player, that allows him to remain in the game as a designated hitter even after he has finished his innings on the mound, as long as he started the game as the pitcher. To most people watching at home, this sounds reasonable. Practical, even. It acknowledges a reality that the old rules were not designed to handle. To Craig Starten, standing at that podium after 2 consecutive losses, it did not sound reasonable at all. This is just too unfair, he said. And what he meant, what the context makes clear, is that the rule gives Ohtani something no other player in baseball has. It gives him the ability to exist in two roles simultaneously, protected by a rule that bends the structure of the game specifically to accommodate him. You cannot plan for a pitcher and a cleanup hitter in the same body. You cannot build a scouting report, a pitching plan, a defensive alignment, a bullpen strategy, for both. The rule does not just allow Ohtani to play both ways. It forces every opposing manager to defend against both ways, simultaneously, without the traditional tools the game provides for managing that kind of threat. Craig Star-10 is not wrong. It is unfair. The question, the more interesting question, is whether unfair is the right frame for something that is simply unprecedented. Let's slow down and look at that press conference carefully. Because Craig Star-10 is not a man who speaks carelessly. Interim or not, he has been in professional baseball long enough to know what a microphone costs you. He has sat in enough post-game rooms to understand that what you say in the first 20 minutes after a loss will be replayed, analyzed, and quoted in ways you cannot fully predict. He said, "This is just too unfair anyway." Which tells you something about the emotional state he was in. Not out of control, he remained composed, he spoke clearly, he did not throw anyone under the bus. But the frustration was real and it came through in that phrase in a way that press conference discipline could not fully contain. After saying it, he elaborated. He spoke about the difficulty of preparing for a player who shifts roles within a single game. He spoke about the competitive disadvantage of facing a lineup that has Ohtani's bat available in the late innings after his arm has already done damage in the early innings. He was specific. He was measured. But underneath every specific, measured word was the same core feeling. He had prepared as well as he could. His staff had done the work. And the Ohtani rule had still given the other team something his preparation could not neutralize. What is remarkable about that press conference, what became the talking point not just for baseball media but for the broader sports conversation that followed, is not the anger. Anger after two losses is normal. It is expected. It is professional. What is remarkable is what came after the anger. Somewhere in the middle of that press conference, the tone changed. It was not a dramatic shift. It did not happen because a reporter asked a particularly clever question or because Star-10 made a deliberate decision to change direction. It happened the way genuine things happen, gradually, and then suddenly, and without anyone in the room quite being able to identify the exact moment it occurred. A reporter asked about a specific action by Ohtani. Not a home run. Not a strikeout. Not a play that showed up in the highlight reel or added to the statistical line that was already making the ERA leaderboard look confused. A specific action. Something Ohtani did, the kind of thing that gets noticed by people paying close attention and missed entirely by everyone else. And Craig Star-10, the man who had just spent several minutes explaining why the Ohtani rule was fundamentally unfair to opposing managers, who had just articulated the competitive disadvantage with real precision, who had come to that podium carrying the weight of two consecutive losses, stopped. He paused.